Today on it, I'm doing a oil burner this time. So I've already got my blank up on the lathe. I'm starting to drill it out. I'm using a 41mm Foster bit to give me the overall size. That gives a bit of clearance for the glass container that goes in it. I like to give a bit of clearance so it doesn't snag in there. This being oak, I'm taking my time drilling it because it is quite hard and it does get the old bit hot if you aren't careful. So you don't want to get too hot, you take the temper out a bit. But it's quite satisfying to see the shavings coming out of it as it's drilled. It's just one of them, it sort of tickles me a bit. And when they're coming out nice and clean like that, it shows you your drill bit and your speed and everything's about right. If you're new to it and aren't sure, it's always better to have it on a slower speed than too high a speed, because as I said, that'll warm your drill bits up. Finished drilling, now I'm swapping over in the tailstop, taking the drill chuck out, and I put in a revolving centre. I should wind that in, that just helps to stabilise it when you're machining it and turning it like.
Not far off now.
Using the big gouge just to rough it out to the shape, and as it hasn't been on the lathe for quite a while, as it was off cut, the wood tends to move, so I've got to re-round it and reshape it. I'll get it to a rough cylinder and then start to decide what shape I want it. You see, I just lay my fingers on top of it. I'm just touching it, there's no pressure there, and you can feel them when any bits that aren't round, you'll feel it, but don't put too much pressure on. You might hurt your fingers. You can also tell by the way the tool's cut in, when it's not all round, you get like an intermittent sound and an intermittent cut. You can tell that way as well. If you're not comfortable touching it while it's spinning, just stop the lathe and eye it up and see how it is like. Just trying to establish the shape of the top now. I don't want to take too much off because I've drilled it to the depth I want to. I just want the neck of the oil burner, just poke it over. But I'm just tidying it a bit, and then I'll work on to the rest of it then.
Trim it up, get it to about the right size.
I've established the overall length I want it, so I'm now I'm parting it, not very far, but enough to give me a distinction on the very bottom of it, then I can work my shape accordingly. You don't want to go too far, you want to leave enough wood there for it to be stable while you're turning the rest of it. But this way I find it's easier than having just a mark there. You've got that lip and end to follow from then. Just using my spindle gauge now to get refine the shape. Like on this being a free flowing project, I had a rough design in mind, but then as I'm turning it, you'll see how the wood works. It almost, as silly as it sounds, tell you what shape it wants to be. So it sounds silly, but if you do any turning, you'll know what I mean. The wood with the grain of it works better on some shapes than others. I find if you're trying to do a consistent sort of curve, it helps to sort of move your body as well as not just your arms. Because if you move your body and keep your arms fairly static, that sort of almost gives you an axis to rotate on and gives a nice curve then. Here I've swapped over to a round end scraper, and I'm just sort of using it to refine the shape. Don't really use it for turning as such, but if you get it right, it takes off little shavings, very fine shavings, and it helps to finish the project. So there's less sanding to do. I like to get as much done with the tool rather than relying on sandpaper. You can't really see it on this angle, but I'm holding the scraper probably around a 30-degree angle, so it's more shear scraping. It tends to give you again a finer result. You can vary it accordingly, and with a scraper you tend to have the handle more up, so you're cutting sort of just below the centre line, whereas most of the turning tools you're centre line and slightly above, so it's bits you pick up after you've done it for a while. Sort of, I'm always, even now after all the years I've done it, I'm always figuring out or working out ways that work better for certain woods or certain turnings. This scraper is quite handy because it has a movable tip on it. I'll have to try and give you a better shot of it next time I'm using it, but it means you can change the angle. It's got a flat on it, a shallow curve, and then a steeper curve, and it does help for getting into different bits better when you can just move it rather than having to fix one. The general rule of thumb is when you're turning is you tend to try to always turn downhill, so you sort of start at the biggest part and work down to the smaller part. That way you sort of more cut the fibres. If you go uphill, you tend to go against the grain and it'll pull it out rather than cut it. There is sometimes where, as you've seen, I'm going almost the wrong way, so to speak, but for some bits it works, but generally that's a better way to try and do it. Fairly happy with the outside shape now. So I've moved the tailstock, adjusted me tool rest so I can just clean up a bit on the inside. And while I had the lathe stopped, I checked the tightness of the chuck because it can move when you're turning. Again here you can see I'm adjusting the scraper now because I want to work on the sidewalls. So I've got the more rounded curve on it now. I'm just gently touching the sides. I'm cleaning it up. I'm not really turning it any sense, just cleaning it up like. And if the bottom was going to be on show, I'd clean the bottom up and get rid of the mark from the drill and the little pip it leaves in the centre. But you won't see it, so it's not worth worrying about. You can see there I'm rounding off the top of it, and you notice the head of the tool's staying fairly stationary, but the handle is revolving around, and that helps to sweep a nice curve out, especially on end grain. Cleaning the bottom up a bit now because I'm pretty happy with it, so I'll be sanding in a minute. But it's quite satisfying when you're using the tools that you get the chips fly out. It's not a clean hobby by any state. You end up with wood chips everywhere. But I do find it a very satisfying hobby generally. It's one you can lose a lot of time on. Might not help with the missus, but she's got used to me by now. I've been doing it for a lot of years now, on and off, and I really enjoy it. On these videos, I'm not saying this is the 100% right way to do it, the various bits. It's just bits that I find work for me. There's all different methods and different ideas, and you tend to develop your own way of doing it once you've got the basics off. Just trying to share some of the knowledge that I've worked up over the years, and you know, it should hopefully come in handy for some people who want to give these things a try. Move on to the sanding now, and as I got a reasonable finish from the tool and it's hardwood, I tend to start at something like 120 grit. If it needs a bit more refining, you can go at 80 or something, but the finish on this was pretty good to start with. I'll start on 120 and work up, and it just pays when you're doing it to keep your sandpaper moving, and you see I'm turning it and everything else, and you get used to how to do it. You can mould it with your fingers to the shape you want. On some of it you'll see where I've got the bit of paper at either end, and I'm sort of using that to sand the curve, and it tends to help it sand evenly then, because you aren't putting a single point of pressure on. You can bend and twist the paper so it follows the curve better. I said it's fairly easy. It looks like this. I'm closer to the actual chuck with me left hand than I actually am. I've got clearance there. You want to bear that in mind, that you don't catch your hand on the chuck. But as I said, from this angle it looks like I'm a lot closer than I actually am. Where you see me put my fingers with the sandpaper inside, that's one you've got to be a bit careful with, because you can have it that the sandpaper catches and wrap around your fingers. It's one I tend to do it on some projects because I'm used to doing it, but normally if I aren't sure, I've got my other hand near the stop button. I don't want my fingers broken, that wouldn't be good. you can wrap a sandpaper around a bit of dowel or something to do the internals if you want. It depends on the project. Sometimes I'm a bit cavalier with it, but you do tend to get that way when you've done a lot of it. Whether it's good or bad, well, we'll find out in the end, innit? Fortunately, where it came out quite well off the tool, it was minimal sanding really. I think I finished with a bit of 300 or 320, something like that. And then I burnish it off with old shavings, and then I'll be ready to put the polish on then and finish it off. So I shall catch you on the next bit.
Sure, but this one's quite useful for it, because you can turn it to whatever angle you want to, so it can be quite handy for this type of job.
Right, now it's all sanded off, it's all finished and everything. With the lathe stopped, I put on the friction polish, and now I shall just gently work it in. With it, if you've got to keep your cloth damp with it, otherwise it'll burn. And I've got it on a slow speed at the moment, and I shall speed it up when I'm ready then. Just keep your cloth moving with it when you're using it. Slowly work it in, and then as it comes up I should bring the speed up a bit and put the final finish on it. And now I'm happy with the result and the finish on it. I'll part it all off, and then job will be done. And again, I'm getting ready to catch it as it falls off the machine. Looks over, quite pleased with the result. As you can see, the knot has really come out on this piece of wood, which is what I saved it for a particular project, because the knot has just made a beautiful feature in it. I've got it displayed here so you can see what it looks like. I shall pop the lights off so you can see what it looks like. The knot really has come out and helped shape the piece. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, if you'd care to do a like, subscribe, and then that'll cheer me up. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you all on the next one. Bye bye now.